Tomatoes are the most popular vegetable in the American home garden. They are also, depending on how you measure, one of the most overrated. Not because they are bad. Tomatoes are genuinely productive, genuinely delicious, and genuinely worth growing. But here is the problem. Most gardeners give tomatoes the best bed, the sunniest spot, the most water, the most attention, and then wonder why 4 months of effort produced 30 pounds of fruit that cost them nearly as much in time and inputs as it would have to buy at the store. The issue is not the tomato. The issue is what you could have grown in that same space with less work and gotten more food per square foot for more of the year. Washington State University Extension agronomists ran comparisons of common garden vegetables across 3 metrics: yield per square foot, monetary value per pound, and months in production. The crops that consistently outscored tomatoes on all 3 were not the ones most gardeners prioritize. They were not the flashy crops on the seed display rack. They were the quiet ones, the ones that grow back after you cut them, the ones that produce in 3 seasons instead of 1, the ones that most people walk past at the farmer's market because they do not know what to do with them. This video is about 6 of those crops. I am going to give you the real yield numbers, the honest mistakes that kill production in year 1, and the specific varieties that outperform everything else in their category. Stay through to the end. The last crop on this list produces food in a part of the season when your tomato plants are still sitting inside as seedlings, and it requires almost no work to do it. The first crop is one that outsells tomatoes by weight at most farmers' markets and costs almost nothing to produce. Fresh culinary herbs, specifically a trio of basil, cilantro, and flat-leaf parsley grown together as a continuous cut system. Here is the math that surprises most gardeners. Grocery store fresh basil retails for $2 to $3 per ounce. Seeds cost pennies. A single 4x4 foot bed managed correctly as a cut-and-come-again system can produce 8 to 12 ounces of fresh basil per week through the warm season. That is $16 to $36 worth of grocery store product per week from 16 square feet of bed space. UC Cooperative Extension research confirms that crops harvested frequently with high retail price per pound deliver the best financial return for home gardeners, and culinary herbs sit at the top of that ranking by a significant margin. The system works because you never let herbs flower. The moment a basil plant goes to seed, the leaves turn small, bitter, and sparse. Your only job is cutting the flower stalks before they open, which also triggers branching and increases leaf production. Cut every stem with a flower bud. Do it twice a week during peak summer. The plant responds by putting out 2 new branching stems for every one you remove. That is not a coincidence. That is the plant's reproductive strategy working in your favor. Genovese basil is the variety with the largest leaf surface and strongest yield consistency. Siam Queen is the Thai basil equivalent if you cook Southeast Asian food. For cilantro, Slow Bolt is the variety you want because standard cilantro goes to seed aggressively in heat and your harvest window collapses to 2 weeks. Slow Bolt gives you 4 to 6 weeks of leaf production before bolting, and the seeds that form after bolting are coriander, a second usable product from the same plant. The mistake that collapses herb production faster than anything else is irregular harvesting. Gardeners who cut herbs once a week get decent yields. Gardeners who cut every 2 to 3 days get 2 to 3 times more volume from the same number of plants. Frequency of harvest is the single biggest lever in herb production, and most people pull it too slowly. The second crop produces more food value per square foot than tomatoes across the full calendar year, and most gardeners only grow it for 6 weeks in spring before letting it bolt and writing it off. Swiss chard. The reason chard outperforms tomatoes on a full-year basis is simple. It produces in 3 seasons. Start it in early spring. Harvest through summer heat that would have killed your lettuce and spinach entirely. Keep harvesting into late fall after your tomatoes are long finished. In mild climates, it overwinters and starts producing again in February without replanting. UC Master Gardeners document chard producing 3 to 5 pounds of usable leaf and stem per plant over an 8 to 10 month growing season, continuing through summer temperatures that cause spinach to bolt immediately. One established plant, harvested correctly, feeds a household for months. The correct harvest method is the piece most people miss. Always cut the outer stems at the base, leaving 6 to 8 inner leaves untouched. Never cut the central growing point. The plant rebuilds from the center outward. Gardeners who cut from the top down, which is the intuitive approach, are cutting the growth engine of the plant and halting production within 2 to 3 weeks. Cut from the outside in every time. Ford Hook Giant is the heaviest producing variety. Bright Lights produces slightly less per plant, but the colored stems sell at farmers markets at a meaningful premium over plain green. Perpetual Spinach, which is technically a chard variant despite the name, is the most tender option and handles heat exceptionally well. The mistake with chard is treating it like a one-season annual. Gardeners who pull it in July because it looks tired are leaving 3 to 4 months of production in the ground. Cut it hard in midsummer heat, water deeply, and it rebounds as temperatures drop in September. That rebound harvest is often the most productive of the year. The third crop is the one nobody thinks of when they imagine a high-yield garden, and it produces 2 entirely separate harvests from the same square foot at 2 different points in the season. Garlic. Here is why garlic earns its space in a way most gardeners do not understand. You plant it in October, it does almost nothing visible through winter. In spring, it sends up scapes, which are the curling flower stalks that hardneck varieties produce, and those scapes are themselves a harvestable product. Garlic scapes taste like mild garlic with a grassy freshness. They sell for $3 to $5 per bunch at farmers markets, and most garlic growers cut them anyway to redirect energy into the bulb. If you are growing for personal use and not selling, that is still a bonus harvest you are getting for free. The bulbs themselves cure over 2 to 3 weeks after harvest and store for 6 to 10 months without refrigeration. That is a food source with a 6 to 10 month shelf life that you grew once. No other annual vegetable delivers that storage advantage. University of Minnesota Extension research tracking small-scale garlic operations found direct-to-consumer growers earning an average of roughly 30 cents per square foot in operating revenue, with top performers reaching 89 cents per square foot. At retail prices of $10 to $14 per pound for premium hardneck varieties at farmers markets, a 100 square foot bed producing 50 to 100 pounds of cured bulbs represents $500 to $1,400 in gross product value. Music is the hardneck variety with the most consistent large bulb yield and the flavor profile that commands premium pricing. German Red is a rocambole type with exceptional flavor but slightly shorter storage life. Saved seed from your own harvest covers 53% of your production cost in subsequent years, which is why established garlic growers have dramatically better margins than first-year growers who buy all their seed stock. The mistake is harvesting too early. Garlic is ready when half the leaves have yellowed and dried. Pull it a week too soon and the wrappers are thin, storage life drops significantly, and the cloves are smaller than they should be. Wait for the signal the plant gives you, not the calendar date you set in spring. The fourth crop is the one that took me the longest to accept as a legitimate replacement for tomatoes, because for most of my gardening life, I associated it with bad buffet food and boiled-to-death side dishes. Zucchini and summer squash, managed correctly and harvested at the right size. Here is the yield reality. A single well-managed zucchini plant in good soil produces 20 to 30 pounds of fruit over a season. That plant occupies about 4 square feet of ground. That is 5 to 7 pounds per square foot, which is the highest raw weight yield per square foot of any common vegetable in the garden. The catch is that most gardeners manage zucchini incorrectly and end up with 3 plants competing for space and producing fruit that is too large, too seedy, and too watery to enjoy. The entire productivity advantage of zucchini depends on harvest timing. Fruit picked at 6 to 8 inches long is at peak flavor, peak texture, and at the size that signals the plant to keep producing. Fruit left to grow beyond that size sends a hormonal signal that the plant has successfully reproduced, and production slows dramatically. The plant is trying to finish its life cycle. Your job is to prevent that by harvesting every 2 to 3 days without exception. Costata Romanesco is the Italian heirloom variety that produces the most complex flavor and holds market value far above standard green zucchini. Patio Star is the compact option for gardeners with limited space. One plant of either variety is enough for a household of 4 during peak season. Probably more than enough. The honest downside is that summer squash requires consistent checking. If you go on vacation for 10 days without someone harvesting, you will return to yellow baseball bats that are good for nothing except composting, and the plants will have largely stopped producing in your absence. That is not a manageable problem for every gardener, and it is worth knowing before you plant 6 of them. The 5th crop grows vertically and produces 3 to 4 times more food per square foot of ground than any flat-growing crop except zucchini. Pole beans. UC Agriculture and Natural Resources documents that pole beans produce 1 to 2 pounds per plant, and in intensive spacing, you can fit 8 to 9 plants per square foot of trellis space. The math is straightforward. That same square foot of ground that supports a single tomato plant, trellised pole beans can deliver 8 to 18 pounds of harvestable pods from. The trellis is a vertical multiplier. A 6-foot section of fence or netting with beans climbing it is not taking up 6 square feet of productive ground. It is using 1 square foot of ground to access 6 feet of vertical growing surface. That is the efficiency shift that most gardeners never fully exploit. Pole beans also fix their own nitrogen. Bush beans do this too, but pole beans do it over a longer productive window. They are actively improving the soil they are growing in while they produce food, which means the bed they occupy is in better condition after the beans are finished than it was before they started. That is a benefit tomatoes do not provide. In fact, heavy-feeding tomatoes often leave soil depleted and requiring amendment before the next planting. Kentucky Wonder is the old standard and still one of the most reliable producers in variable conditions. Rattlesnake bean is the variety with the strongest yield in heat. Blue Lake Pole is the variety most chefs prefer for flavor and tenderness. The mistake with pole beans is the same one as zucchini: irregular harvesting. Pods left to mature and dry on the vine signal the plant to stop flowering. Pick every 3 to 4 days, harvest young, and a well-managed trellis of pole beans produces continuously for 8 to 10 weeks. Let pods yellow on the vine, and production stops within days. The 6th crop is the one that earns its spot on this list by doing something no other vegetable can match. It produces harvestable food while your tomato seeds are still on the shelf waiting for last frost, and then it keeps producing after your last tomato has come off the vine in fall. Salad greens grown as a cut-and-come-again system, specifically a managed combination of loose-leaf lettuce, arugula, and spinach in succession. Here is the productivity case. The average home gardener plants tomatoes in May and harvests from July through October. 4 months of production window. A properly managed salad green system using row covers in early spring and fall produces from March through November in most of the continental United States. That is 8 months of productive harvest from the same beds, starting 6 weeks before tomatoes are in the ground and ending 6 weeks after the last tomato is gone. That doubled production window is not an incremental improvement. It is the difference between a garden that feeds you for a third of the year and one that feeds you for most of it. The cut-and-come-again method is the key. You are not pulling heads and replanting. You cut the outer leaves 2 inches above the soil line, the plant regrows from the center, and you harvest again in 7 to 14 days. A single sowing of loose-leaf lettuce managed this way produces 3 to 5 harvests before it needs to be replanted. Succession planting, which means sowing a new small batch every 10 to 14 days, gives you continuous harvest without gaps. UC Cooperative Extension confirms that intensive spacing of greens, planting at the closer end of recommended spacing, increases total production per unit of ground area by 20 to 50% compared to traditional row spacing. Black-seeded Simpson is the loose-leaf lettuce with the widest temperature tolerance and the most reliable cut-and-come-again regrowth. Astro arugula is the variety with the deepest flavor and the best heat resistance before bolting. Thai spinach is the slowest bolting spinach available, extending your spring harvest window by 2 to 3 weeks compared to standard varieties. Here's how these 6 crops work together as a system rather than 6 separate decisions. Start your salad greens in early March under row cover. By the time they have given you 2 harvests, your garlic is sizing up for its May scaping. Harvest scapes. Let garlic bulk through June. Pull garlic in July, cure it for 3 weeks, and replant that bed immediately with a fall succession of salad greens and a second planting of chard. Your herbs produce continuously through the warm months alongside all of this. Your zucchini and pole beans handle the bulk of summer output when salad greens are bolting in heat. Your chard bridges every gap between the other crops. None of these plants occupies your best bed for 4 months and then produces nothing for 8. None of them requires the pest management, the staking, the caging, or the disease monitoring that indeterminate tomatoes demand in most climates. That does not mean stop growing tomatoes. It means grow 2 tomato plants for pleasure and grow the rest of this list for productivity. The garden that feeds your household most of the year is not the one with the most tomatoes. It is the one with the most production windows, the most vertical growing, the most cut-and-come-again crops, and the most plants that improve the soil they grow in. Plant one of these 6 this season and track the harvest. The numbers will make the decision for you next year.